Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tycos. Since we just had an election where the impact of inflation on prices at the supermarket and elsewhere were a major factor, we thought we'd take a quick look at inflation's root causes. Here's where we're going to show you an obscure but important report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York called the Global Supply Chain Pressure Index, or GSCPI. Here's how the Fed describes it. The GSCPI integrates a number of commonly used metrics with the aim of providing a comprehensive summary of potential supply chain disruptions. Global transportation costs are measured by employing from the Baltic Dry Index and the HARPEX Index, as well as air freight cost indices from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The GSCPI also uses several supply chain-related components from the Purchasing Managers Index surveys, focusing on manufacturing firms across 7 interconnected economies: China, the Euro area, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. In other words, it puts together a lot of reporting to see whether supply chains are screwed up or not. Let's take a look. This was a pretty boring chart from the beginning of 1998 through February of 2020, and then pretty boring again after the summer of 2022. But in between, entirely due to COVID, it became a Mount Everest, as you can see. So let's lay the GSCPI chart over the inflation chart for the period between 2017 and 2024. Linked month inflation, the best gauge of what is happening at a given moment or given month, reached its peak in the summer of 2022, and the GSCPI reached its peak 6 months before that in December of 2021. From this, it's easy to see that supply chain disruption, as shown by the GSCPI index, is a leading indicator and a causal factor in high inflation. By the way, you see it go up in 2020. That's when supply chains kind of didn't function because nobody was going to work, and didn't cause inflation because nobody was buying anything. So that was kind of the unique early period in COVID, as you'll recall. But you can also see that by late summer 2022, the GSCPI was already plummeting and inflation then followed suit. Since then, the GSCPI has barely been above zero, and even though prices remain high and we don't expect that they'll decline, they are at least back to increasing at a more benign normal rate, which is to say that inflation is now much more well-behaved. But it wasn't just COVID that factored into inflation, unfortunately. It was war, too. In the fall of 2021, Russia started telegraphing its invasion of Ukraine and then commenced that invasion in February of 2022, and the price of oil and wheat and other things, frankly, erupted, exacerbating the inflation story. That made the inflation we suffered worse than it would have been with just COVID. Oil and wheat prices have calmed since then, but of course could increase again if wars widen. Here we see how closely correlated these prices were with high inflation. Now let me lay the inflation chart on top of those, and you can see how directly oil and wheat played into this painful equation. COVID and war, it was a double whammy. Your local economic commentator has been blaming inflation on government spending, but there are too many counterfactuals for that to be credible. In other words, too many periods where government spending exploded, but high inflation did not follow, including the U.S. in 2009, notably, 1986, for those of you who remember that, and even Japan after 1998. So that's the story of our recent bout with high inflation, and to a certain extent, that's the story of the 2024 election. That's all we have for this week. Thanks.